All right, go ahead. What happened in the Everglades?
Traditionally, every New Year's, Mom and I usually go down to Everglades National Park. And 2 years ago, we went down there and said, we need to take the canoe to 9 Mile Pond. But we didn't. We waited a whole year to do that. On New Year's Day, we went to 9 Mile Pond with our canoe. We got there about 2:30 in the afternoon. We loaded the canoe into the water and talked to a lady who just come back from the trip who said that it only took her an hour and a half. The ranger had told us that there's 144 markers on the trail through the Everglades, and that it takes about an hour and a half, but there's a cutoff trail that you can take. So we went off across 9 Mile Pond looking for the entrance. 9 Mile Pond's about a quarter of a mile wide. First of all, we started off in the wrong direction, and we ended up deep in the mangroves, unable to turn around. We had to back out of the mangroves, back into 9 Mile Pond, and then find another place to start. When we finally got started, we found a marker. It was a tall white pole marked number 1. And we thought, we must be on the trail. And so we followed the trail, number 2, number 3. We would come to areas where it would be close, where you'd have to almost duck to get under the mangroves to follow the trail. Other places where it would be wide open and deep water. And we kept going like this for a good 45, 50 minutes, and I suddenly noticed that we were going east away from the car, and the sun was starting to get kind of low because it was the 1st of January. Well, we finally reached a point where I was getting nervous because we kept going east, and I thought, gosh, we could get lost out here. It was getting late in the afternoon. We finally came to marker number 41, and there's supposed to be 144 of these things. And I finally said to Sally, I think we should just turn around and go back because we're going to get stuck out here. And all she could say to me was, why aren't you taking pictures? So we kept on going a little further and finally came to marker number 44. At marker 44, there is a marker that says shortcut. We had a choice of going to the right, further east, or going kind of northeast. So we start off northeast, and we were going across this, suddenly came this big plain. We left all these trees that we were in, and we were on this big plain where the water was probably anywhere from a foot to a foot and a half deep, with all this grass growing up in it. As we paddled, it was very hard to paddle because you'd push the canoe, and as soon as you pulled the paddle out of the water, the canoe would stop because of the drag. And it was a long way across this thing. We could barely see the next marker. We got to the next marker, and it didn't have a number, but there was another marker beyond that, and also a long distance away. I would guess it was easy, anywhere from 150 to 200 yards between markers. We finally get to the 3rd marker, and it said a place where we can see markers coming from the east and markers going to the west, and it's marker number 83A. We thought, well, we've jumped from 44 to 83, which way do we go? I guessed correctly that we would go back toward the west, which is where we'd parked. But the next marker was a long way off again, another 150 yards at least, or more. So we got to the next marker, and there was no number on it. So we had no idea if the numbers were going up or down. We went past that one to the next marker, and finally, after that one, we found 83B. So I thought, oh my gosh, at the distance we're going, by now it's getting close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we look up there, and the sun is really starting to get low for this time of year. And I really was nervous that we were going to get stuck out there. And I think she was starting to get nervous too. She was getting tired. Well, we kept going. Next one went to 84, and then 85, and finally we got back in the mangroves. And we started going through all these little twists and turns. Now, the whole time we were out there, we didn't see anything. No people. We saw a few birds, that was it. At one point, Mom saw something in the water that scared her. We don't know what it was. I think it was probably an alligator, but she thinks it was something else. Anyway, we started going through all the trees, and now that the path twists and turns, it was like what it was when we came out. Every once in a while we come to some open water, but it wasn't real open. And then we heard some voices. Oh, thank goodness, people. So we ran around this curve, and there's 4 canoes coming toward us. And so I asked the man, how far do we have to go to get out of this place? And he said, you got about 20 minutes. And he says, you have to get to number 116 is the marker you got to get to. So we paddle a little further, and we go past the marker. I don't know what the number was, but it was over 100. and we had to go through this narrow passage, and we came out into this like a little pond. It was like a lot of these little ponds out there, and the pond was roughly, I would guess, maybe anywhere from 50 to 100 feet wide, or in diameter. They're circular. And we went through the thing, past the marker, and we saw no other markers. And we looked around; it was completely enclosed. We thought, how do we get out of here? And we sat there looking and couldn't see the next exit. So finally I said to Sally, let's just back up and go back where we came from. We must have made a wrong turn. Well, just as we're backing up, she suddenly says, oh, I see it. She saw the next marker, and it was stuck in the trees, and you had to be just at the right angle to see it. And it looked like there was no entrance there, but there was definitely a marker. So we paddled over to it, and when we got there, you could just barely see a passage, just barely wide enough for a canoe to go through. You had to push some limbs out of the way. We went through the passage and found the next marker, and we went a little further, and we got up to something like number 112 or something like that. I forgot what it was. And we came out of this big lake. It was a lake about the size of 9 Mile Pond, which was roughly a quarter of a mile in diameter. And there was no more markers. And we thought, well, where do we go now? Because it wasn't 9 Mile Pond. But off to the southwest, I could see another opening. So I said, well, let's go over there, because that's at least in the direction we have to go. I know we have to go toward the southwest or south to get back to the car. So we went over there and went through the passage, and sure enough, we came out into another pond. But again, there was no marker, and again, it was about a quarter of a mile in diameter. And there was an opening on the other side. So we went to the other side and went through that passageway, and when we did, at that point, we came out on 9 Mile Pond. But there was no way you could see that opening from 9 Mile Pond side. You could only see it from the side of the pond north of it. And we finally got back to the car. It was well after 4 o'clock. The sun was really getting low. And I thought, man, I feel like we're lucky to get back at this time. Because if we had gone the long way around this 9 Mile Pond, which was, the whole trip is 5.4 miles if you'd go the whole length, we'd have been out there in the dark. But luckily, we made some lucky turns.
Good.
The ranger had told us that it was clearly marked. Well, mostly it's clearly marked. The rest of it, you just sort of have to be lucky. And that's our story.
What does Mom think she saw in the water, if you think it's an alligator?
She thinks it was a big snake. But she's not sure. It could have been a fish. There are some big fish.
It could have been a big snake, too.
Yes, it could have been. Snakes usually stay on the surface. This was underneath the surface, which makes me think it was a big fish. I've got a feeling it's a big bass or something. But it scared her. I couldn't see it. But going through, when we went across that plain, where the markers weren't marked, it was very hard paddling because this heavy grass grew up out of the bottom and really dragged the canoe down. And she got really tired paddling.
So say that's my story.
That's my story.
And I'm sticking to it.
I'm sticking to it no matter what.